Imperator Rome's economy is something definitely deserving of a guide, especially because depending on a player's experience and understanding of economies, they might not even know where to look to find it. Imperator Rome doesn't have a traditional real-life economy with GDP, nor does it focus too heavily on the production of goods. You have two different things in Imperator Rome that could count as an economy. The first is going to be the production of these little resources that you import and export. That's probably the closest thing we have to a real economy. And the second, which is actually under the economy tab, are your finances. And so we're going to talk about these things, how they work, and I might drop some suggestions on how you should use them. Let's start with the actual economy tab, which is talking exclusively about finances and nothing to do with the economy. So let's start with taxes, which is also a really weird name choice because this really isn't a collection of taxes. If you've seen my buildings guide, you may be familiar in how this is made. If you go to any one of your settlements or provinces, you'll find slaves, tribesmen, freemen, depending on what your government type is. You get the most taxes created by slaves. After that, tribesmen are a decent source of it. They're definitely better at making taxes, even if they're only a quarter as good as slaves, than freemen are, which are way worse. While I don't understand how demographics that are working for free are going to be generating more taxes than freemen, which would actually be more likely to be working paid jobs, that is how this works. This is where your tax income is coming from. Citizens and nobles, where you would expect to get taxes from, they do not produce any taxes at all. You're looking entirely at your lower class that does not even qualify to be a citizen of your country. This is where all your tax income comes from. You can see income, including tax income, on every province. It'll summarize every settlement's income right here for you to see, and you can see the total of it in the economy tab right here and see what provinces it's coming from. You could see modifiers, and these modifiers can come from different laws. They can come from different texts, which I've been touching upon these things in my videos. The tech tree is really just too big to talk about all at once, but generally the civics tech tree is where you want to go to find the most amount of texts that affect taxes, and not all of them. Some of them are over here on the right, but most of them that affect your money are going to be over here on the left side, such as property tax. This one down here, Isphora, it's another 2.5%. You got liturgies, that has another 10% when active. Look for this little symbol especially, but you'll still find tax revenue modifiers elsewhere as well. If you hover over the population here, you'll be able to see what affects them. Their output, what they produce with their output per the amount that they have. You can see the output efficiency. You can see everything modifying it. The governor is enough to modify their output efficiency. Whether or not they're in a capital or not can modify it. The presence of certain goods, such as horses, you look for this modifier. Population output, plus 1%. And then there's also just base reductions as civilization value goes up, which I've talked about in my culture guide especially. Civilization value right here, as that goes up, you'll just make more taxes by default, more production in general for all of your populations. Capital territory, capital province. There's a lot of things that modify this, and this is where you see it. Now, default taxation is fine. It's not much to talk about. It's probably where your taxes are going to be for most of the game. However, if you're having a happiness problem and you're willing to give up half of your tax income, which in the it may not look like it right now, but when the game actually takes off, taxes are not going to be your main source of income. So if you're willing to lose half of your second biggest source of income, then you can lax taxes to get a 10% population happiness buff. I wouldn't usually use this, but if you're having a problem with revolts and keeping people happy and you just need a little time to improve conditions, this is a good way to get some population happiness out of thin air. Harsh taxation or high taxation, we go from left to right, low to high. This is also interesting because this doesn't just grant you more taxes directly, like this removes in the lax taxes. This grants you more slave output. More slave output could mean more money, as we've seen. Unless you rely on freemen or tribesmen, then this will not really mean more money. But it can also affect the production of your resources as well. Now, it does come with a caveat. You lose 20% of your research points. So I kind of talked about this briefly in my research video. I made a tech video. I'll talk about it more now. Research efficiency here. You want it to hit your maximum efficiency to be pumping out the maximum amount of research, and it's shown as a percentage value. Once it gets to that max, it's not actually going to show you how high it is. So I have 130, let's say, research efficiency, but my max is 125. It's only going to display as 125. Let's take a look at this right here. Right now, I have 90%. Let's put this harsh taxation up, and now it went down by like exactly 20%. And this is what's going to happen. If you put harsh taxation on, you're basically getting free money so long as your maximum efficiency is 20% lower than what you're actually pumping out. So I'm producing something more like 150% efficiency, which would not display by default. But my maximum efficiency is only 125. There is no reason, absolutely none, to not have harsh taxation on, because that will just give you free money. It'll just take money and make it appear, and you won't lose any research efficiency at all because you're already over your max. Now, if you're under your max, oh look, you see how that actually changed that? That's weird. If you're under your max, you don't want harsh taxation unless you just don't care about research. I leave the idea that you might have that as your strategy, but I don't know why that would be your strategy. I'm just saying the option is there if you want it, though personally I would recommend always prioritizing having at least your max efficiency to research to just generally keep up. Maybe if you're well ahead of time, like you see here, we are 32 years ahead of time. If you're like 80 years ahead of time and staying that way, and you need a little bit more money, sure, then you put on harsh taxation for a while. However, remember I said taxes are not going to be your biggest source of income in this game. What is going to cause most of your income is commerce. Now, it doesn't look like it right now because we're at the start of the game and we haven't started trading any of these resources that you see here. But generally speaking, you're going to be able to trade stuff. Others are going to come to you to buy stuff. You're going to go to others to buy stuff. Whether you're importing or exporting, it is going to cause profits for you. Naturally, exporting your own stuff is worth more. You can even just automate this whole thing by hitting accept all trades, and so long as you hit block surplus, then you won't lose any tactical benefits that I would have gone over in other videos in this guide series. Just do that right there and you won't lose those. But no matter how you choose to handle this, every time a new resource is traded, you will make commerce money. You can also permit or deny certain resources, like let's say I don't want to get rid of elephants for whatever reason. I could just say, nope, you cannot buy my elephants. Okay. Every transaction will result in commerce income. Commerce income by default will outdo your tax income after the start of the game very, very quickly. This will be your primary source of income the entire game. Just making sure that I stress that. There's a couple of options here. By default, this does not work like taxes exactly. There are two polar opposites here with free trade and transaction taxation, but in the middle, with your trading permits, this is different. If you have the middle one enabled, you'll have two more capital import routes. This can allow you to have two more trade routes going to your capital region, which you can also just get by doing business investments right here. This is more of a temporary thing you could swap out. This is mainly useful if you are a small country that does not have many or any, if at all, capital import routes, and you need some bonuses that you don't have. That's great. If you need bonuses, it's great. Then you have transaction taxation. That's a hard thing to say, to be honest. If you're importing a lot and you're not exporting very much, this would allow you to increase your overall income. You can see my income went down by enabling that, because we only have an export really right now. If we go to free trade, this will increase the value of your exports while decreasing the value of your imports. Like I said, both of them make you money. Just based on your situation, which one's going to make you more money? More than likely, as you play through the game, no matter what country you are, for almost the entire game, you are going to be exporting enough that it will outvalue your imports by default. So essentially, in my opinion, except for the very rare circumstances that you're still like too tiny to really export very much, you're too tiny to have a lot of capital import routes, almost the entire game you should probably be on free trade, because you will notice if you watch, your money, your income from free trade is going to be massive. Especially like once you have this enabled, the exports will outdo your taxes, guaranteed. That includes if you have harsh taxation on, by the way. Like, this will never help you increase your taxation enough because it's only a slave output increase. The slave output increase could actually end up in more resources being produced that causes more commerce income as well. After that, it's very simple. Tribute income. If you have tribute, you can choose to get income from them. You can increase the income, make them hate you more, or you can decrease the income and make them like you more. This is up to your play style. This will never be a main source of your income. I'd be very impressed if you found a way to make this a main source of your income, because there are limits to the amount of clients that you can have, except for feudatories, which only provide manpower, no money. As for expenses, wages go to every character, like Crusader King style character that you have working a job. You have to pay them. If you have increased wages, this is a great way to reduce corruption. But this increases your actual wages you're paying out dramatically. And as you get bigger, this will become suffocatingly dramatically. The only way I would ever put this on increased wages is if you have been handing out free hands or doing things that cause corruption to go way up, and you don't have any techs to reduce corruption, of which there are techs to reduce corruption. And as a good place to look, I'd say look at the religious tree, especially as you go down the center here. There's some good ones, guilt by association, for example, but they're a little spread out. There's more of these than just that. Unless you have a lot of corruption and you don't have any of these techs, I would not put increased wages, because you'll be paying more to lower the corruption than you'll be getting back from lowering the corruption. But if you do put yourself in that position, and you really have to try to put yourself in that position, this is a way to help solve corruption. Next up, reduce wages. This will vastly increase your corruption for less wages being paid out. The amount this increases corruption is fucking insane. It is so insane, I don't think every single tech or idea or anything else in the game combined could help you deal with this. So I would only ever use this if you, in the short term, needed to save a lot of money, because in the long term, this will fuck you up. The corruption will get so high, it'll make everybody unhappy. You'll have rebellions, revolutions, you name it, and everyone will be siphoning money from your treasury. Usually, normal wages is all you want. Usually, that's all you want, because the increase in wages to reduce corruption is usually too extreme to be worth it, and the amount of corruption gained from lowering them is way too extreme to be worth it. That's wages. Fort maintenance is pretty simple. If you have improved fortifications, you'll have a higher garrison and fort defense value on every fort that you have placed. You know, these little symbols right here. Helps you defend places longer while you're not there with an army, but it'll increase maintenance. But you can change these very on the fly. So if you go up to down, there's not really a whole lot of transition time there for the effect to take effect. Then you can ignore the garrisons, which causes less maintenance, but it extremely penalizes your fort defense garrison size. If you're in a long period of peace, then there's almost no reason not to do this. If you have zero chance of anybody attacking you, sure, ignore your garrisons. That is saved money, but it's not a lot of saved money. There is a lot more money spent to get improved fortifications, but it's not extreme, and the bonuses could be very valuable in wartime. Generally, though, for the most part, even in wartime, you're going to leave it on paid garrisons. Are you kind of getting the idea of how this is going? Almost everything is an extreme in some way. Unless you're in the center, everything so far, and this is going to hold up, is an extreme except for commerce, where you're just kind of picking between one or the other or some weird center tertiary effect. It holds up as well in maintenance. You want some more morale? Pay 50% more maintenance costs for 5% more morale. That is hardly worth it, but if you for some reason desperately need this and have tons of money sitting around, sure, right? Usually you'll leave it on default. This is for your navies. Decrease pay, it's minus 50% maintenance, but instead of minus 5% morale, like you get plus 5% for increased pay, you're losing 80%. This is just like, I can't pay for my navy, I'm in peacetime, I don't expect them to do any fighting, and I just need money back to spend on other things. That's the only time you activate this. Increased pay. The bonus is so little, I personally would never, ever use it, but that's what it does. It's up to you. Army maintenance, the default gives you a levy size multiplier. Decreased pay will ruin the morale of your armies, not as much as navies, while reducing the cost of your legions. The levy size multiplier stays exactly the same, and your integrated culture happiness goes up. Think about it like that. You're spending less on military, meaning your citizens don't have to fight as much because only your citizens and integrated cultures are allowed to be in the army. They're like, oh, great. Decreased pay means I'm less likely to have to go fight. Wonderful. As for increasing the maintenance, your integrated culture will not be happy with that because that means you're going to war. And they don't like that because they have to serve in the military and they don't want to do that. But they get more morale. Everything starts costing more. It's not as extreme, quite frankly, as a lot of the other ones, but it is still kind of extreme for how much you spend. Middle of the bar is usually the best for everything, except for taxes if you have a lot of research, and then commerce is almost always better on free trade. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. Great. We've covered all that. Now, there's also resources to cover. I glanced briefly at the trade overview to explain one or two things, but this is the main way you're going to be making money in this game, is not through the economy screen. It's through what actually more represents an economy, the production and trade of goods. And I've covered generally how already in the building tutorial, how the buildings interact with resource production. So what I'm going to be explaining right now is how the resources themselves work. So there are different resources. There's a bunch, and you can see every picture in every single one right here. You can hover over them and see all of their effects. If you have 2 of any of these resources in your capital, you will get the surplus in capital effect, which will extend to your entire nation. And some of these are for war. For example, elephants. If you have a surplus in your capital, only your capital, war elephant discipline will go up. That will make your elephants in war better. If you have grain, then you will make more food in your entire nation if you have 2 grain in your capital. This is way more effective naturally than importing 1 grain to every single one of your provinces. So not only is this good for making money, because importing that grain would make you money, or not exporting grain would make you money, but this is going to give you very important buffs. Now, to even have these to begin with, you need, generally, slaves. If we hover over here, you could see slaves are what produce things. Every 18 slaves in Latium will produce an additional cloth. We make 2 cloth. We have enough slaves to produce this current amount. Having a city, having certain buildings can buff up the amount of slaves you need and the base resources that you produce. Any resources that you make that you are not keeping or intentionally, not trading, could automatically, especially if you enable the automated, be traded off except for a surplus for your capital. That could happen. Technically speaking, it is more profitable to, let's say I make cloth here. It is more profitable to export all of this cloth and get the money and then import 2 cloth that I need, because then I'd be getting money from all of those trades and I'd still end up with the bonus. The only downside is that, like, if you don't have enough trade routes, right? I have 4 trade routes. Maybe I want to keep that cloth. So I don't want this automated, but I definitely want block surplus, for example, if it is automated. Or if I don't have that automated, I get the pop-ups up here where they're saying, hey, I want to buy your cloth. I could say no, because I want these 2 cloth for the oratory tech investment bonus. That's faster research. If trading is just like way too much for you, which it can be pretty overwhelming, and since Imperator is not advertised as a Europa Universalis game, despite pretty much being one, you might be one of an audience that doesn't really want to interact with this stuff. So other than automating your own trade here, these are like your exports specifically, you can also go, and unfortunately this has to be on a province by province basis. As a reminder, everything highlighted here is a province. These individual things within it are territories. I can enable automatic trade. Notice I click on any other settlement, it's still on automatic trade. Go over to the next province, it's not on. Anything that I don't want to manage the imports in, I can enable automatic trade. Now, if they have 0 trade routes, they won't import anything. As a reminder, business investments, this is the most efficient way, the most effective way of getting more import routes in any location. Other ways involve building certain buildings, such as marketplaces and just increasing your population that's there, and then that will do the same thing, pretty much. But I find the best way to manage all of this is to just accept all trades, block surplus, so exports are handled automatically. If I need to pull anything back, I will. And then I usually like to automate everything that is not mission relevant or that is not my capital, because I'm trying to min-max my capital bonuses. If you're having trouble understanding what your capital bonuses are, this +1 does not mean you have 1. This +3 does not mean you have 3. This is addition. This picture means that I have 1. It says that I have 1, see? This picture +1 means I have 2. It says I have 2, see? And that's how that is pulled off. And this will show the same no matter whether you're getting it from imports or you're producing it yourself. To actually import things, we click import here and you just select. You have to find someone that has it and is capable of exporting it to you, is in range of you. It'll show checkmark or X if they're actually likely to sell it to you. For example, these guys will not give me earthenware because they'd lose their capital bonus. That capital bonus is pretty important. Even the AI knows to value it. These guys will not lose their capital bonuses, so they'll just be like, yeah, okay, sure. That is how the economy works. Everything else that I could cover has already been explained in other tutorials, such as the buildings. The only other thing I would mention is how to grow your economy. Well, it's always going to be growing naturally over time because your population is always growing based on the amount of territories you have. That's right. Not based on the amount of population you have, and maybe I'll go more in depth in this in another video, but based on the territories you have. So the more territories you have, generally, no matter what buildings you have in there, you will be getting more population growth than someone that has less territories. It's not more pop equals more pop. It's more territories equals more pop. Additionally, there's some honorable mentions like you being at war. If you have a navy off the coast of some enemy ports, you'll raid them, get money. That money can obviously be reinvested to increase the production and size of your economy through certain buildings that boost stuff like that. Every time you take over a territory, you will capture slaves using your enslavement efficiency, which I talked about in a previous video, and that will send slaves back. That means more pops, more slaves, more pops equals bigger economy. And then depending on who you play as, especially, I know like the Greeks have this in the military traditions. If I go to Greek Polis or something like that, there is right here the slave raid ability. It gives you enslavement efficiency, which is great because if you take over a territory, this will make you more likely to get population, which will then be sent back to you to work in your economy, thus expanding it, thus making you more money. But then there's also the slave raid, which is like just a way to go take a navy, for example, and then I don't think it has the button here because our navy's too tiny. No, it does, but there'll be like a button saying slave raid. Just go by a port, slave raid. You'll get aggressive expansion, which is bad, but you'll capture slaves, and then these slaves will be sent back to your home. That will help you grow your pop with slaves. Growing your pop with slaves means more production, more money, more resources, bigger economy. That's pretty much it though. That is how the economy works. All the little buttons that modify it. And of course, the buildings that modify it, which you can learn what every one of these does in my buildings guide. If you want to see a guide on anything else in this game, feel free to let me know in the comments below. I am always running out of ideas on what I could teach about with this game. For now though, thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you on another video.